Every mother has secrets, but mine were never meant to come to light. That's how I will begin this story, because you deserve to know the truth. My children never heard these words from me, not while they were growing up, not even when they were old enough to notice the flickers in my eyes, the way I changed the subject whenever certain topics came close. To them, I was just their dependable mother. Ordinary, maybe even a little boring. Someone who cooked their meals, kept the house tidy, and offered advice when they asked. But behind that smile, behind the steady rhythm of family life, there was a secret I buried so deep I swore it would never surface. I thought silence would protect them. But secrets don't stay buried. They claw at the soil, scratching, fighting, demanding to be let loose. And mine began to stir again one late summer evening. The kind of evening where the sun dipped low and turned the attic windows into molten gold. The air outside was heavy, the sort of air that carried warnings, storms gathering, endings looming. I had not been up in the attic for years, not since the children were little and begged to play dress up with my old gowns and hats. To them, it was a wonderland. To me, it was storage. A place of dust and cobwebs and memories best left untouched. But that day, something pulled me toward the creaky stairs. Instinct, maybe. Or fate. The attic greeted me with its familiar scent, dust, cedar, and something sharp underneath, like iron. The heat was suffocating. I pushed aside boxes filled with holiday decorations, forgotten toys, and brittle photo albums whose pages had curled with time. And then I saw it. A wooden chest. Not just any chest. Heavy oak, iron-bound, its corners dented but unbroken. The wood was darkened with age, its surface scarred as though it had survived 1,000 moves and still refused to die. The hinges were rusted but stubbornly intact. And in the center, a brass lock. Small. Delicate. But firm. A lock I recognized instantly. My heart stopped, then lurched forward again in panic. I knew this box. I had once sworn never to touch it again. Never to even look at it. But here it was, waiting for me like a ghost that had grown tired of being ignored. I knelt, brushing my fingertips over the lid. The wood was warm, though the attic air was sweltering. A chill crept along my arms anyway, crawling higher, making me shiver in spite of the heat. My children had never seen this chest, never even knew it existed. That was by design. I had hidden it here before they were old enough to start rummaging around. And for decades, it had stayed where I left it. Untouched. Until now. You might ask, why not just leave it buried? Why not walk away? Because when I bent closer, I noticed something was different. The lock. It wasn't as firm as I remembered. The brass latch was bent, faintly warped, as though someone had already tried to pry it open. My stomach turned cold. Someone had been here before me. My pulse pounded in my throat. If one of my children had stumbled across this, if they had touched what was inside. No. I couldn't allow myself to finish that thought. I reached instinctively into the pocket of my apron. My fingers brushed against fabric stitching, and then metal. A key. The tiny iron key I had hidden decades earlier, sewn into the lining so carefully I sometimes forgot it was there. I pulled it free. The key trembled in my grip, though it wasn't my hands that were shaking, it was my whole body. The brass lock yielded with a soft click. The sound was terrifying. The lid creaked open, groaning like a voice that had waited too long to be heard. Dust swirled into the sunlight, drifting like ash. Inside, wrapped in yellow lace, lay a handful of objects. An envelope, edges frayed, addressed in handwriting I knew better than my own. A string of pearls, though one bead was cracked clean through, like a tooth broken in half. And a folded piece of paper that seemed to hum with weight, as though the very ink written on it might bleed. My hand hovered, unsure. The envelope called to me first. My fingertips brushed the brittle paper, nearly tearing it. And then I saw the script on the front. It was his handwriting. The man from my past. The man I never told my children about. The attic tilted. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. I couldn't even open it. It felt like if I broke the seal, I had undone all the years I had spent building my safe little life. But finally, with hands clammy and heart hammering, I slid a finger under the flap. The paper inside was thin, fragile, faded with time. And the very first line stole the air from my lungs. If you are reading this, it means the truth can no longer stay buried. I froze. The words pulsed like a drumbeat in my head. My eyes blurred, but I forced myself to read them again. The truth. The attic fell silent. Even the floorboards beneath me seemed to hold their breath. What truth? How much of it was scrawled across these fragile lines? And why now, after all these years? The letter suddenly felt heavy, too heavy to hold. Dangerous. I folded it halfway, pressing it to my chest. My skin prickled, my ears rang. And then I heard it. Floorboards. Down below. Slow. Deliberate. The unmistakable sound of someone moving through the house. My heart kicked violently against my ribs. The attic door groaned faintly, with straining, as though someone had pressed a hand against it. Someone else was here. Had one of my children come home early? Were they calling up the stairs, trying to find me? Or was it someone else? Someone who already knew about the chest. Someone who wanted these secrets dragged into the open. I clutched the letter to my chest until my nails bit into the paper. The footsteps paused. The silence below stretched, unbearable. And then a voice floated up the stairs. Not loud. Not angry. Soft. Almost mocking. Mom, what are you hiding up there? Have you ever looked at a photograph and realized the person smiling back at you was living a lie? That's what happened to me the night I opened the box again. My hands were still trembling from the letter, my chest tight with dread. Whoever had whispered from below was gone by the time I dared peek down the attic stairs. Maybe it had only been my imagination, or maybe not. I didn't have the courage to find out. So I turned back to the chest. Beneath the letter, still wrapped in its brittle lace cloth, lay the second item. A small rectangle. Thin. Fragile. I pulled it free carefully, dust sprinkling into the air. It was a photograph. The edges were curled and browned with age, but the image was still clear enough to pierce me like a blade. There I was, barely 20 years old, standing in a meadow in my summer dress. My hair tumbled loose around my shoulders, and I was laughing. Carefree. Alive. A version of myself my children had never met. But I wasn't alone. Beside me was a man. Tall, broad-shouldered, his arm wrapped casually around my waist. He wore a white shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows, and in the picture he wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking at me. And the way he looked at me, God help me, it was with hunger, with devotion, with something that made my stomach twist even now, decades later. I whispered his name before I could stop myself. Daniel. The sound of it filled the attic, as if I had summoned a ghost. The memories came rushing back like floodwaters breaking a dam. I was 19 when I met him. Too young to know better, too stubborn to care. He wasn't from town, no, Daniel was a stranger. A wanderer. He had arrived on a hot July afternoon, hired to work at the sawmill for a season. Everyone in town said he was trouble. He kept to himself, spoke little, and carried a past he never explained. But when his eyes met mine at the Sunday fair, I felt something stir inside me that no sermon could have warned me against. We met in secret, at first. Down by the river, where the willow trees hung low. I told myself it was harmless, just company, just conversation. But I lied to myself more than anyone else. Because with Daniel, conversation turned to laughter. Laughter turned to touches. Touches turned to stolen kisses. And stolen kisses turned to a love I was never supposed to have. I pressed the photograph against my chest, my throat tight. My children never knew about him. How could they? By the time they were born, Daniel was already gone, his name buried as deep as my shame. To them, I was married to their father, devoted and loyal. They believed ours was a life built on stability and honesty. They never saw the cracks. They never saw the ghost of the man who had nearly changed everything. But holding that photograph now, I couldn't deny what we had shared. And yet, something about the image unsettled me. At first, I thought it was only nostalgia twisting my stomach. But then I looked closer. The photograph was wrong. In the corner, almost hidden by shadow, stood another figure. Blurred, half out of frame, as though the camera had caught them by accident. A man. Watching. His hat pulled low. His mouth caught in what might have been a smirk. I had never noticed him before. Not when the picture was first taken, not the few times I dared look at it before hiding it away in the chest. But now, with the attic light slanting across the paper, I saw him clearly. And a realization made my blood run cold. That wasn't just a stranger in the background. That was Thomas. My ex-husband. But how? This picture had been taken before I ever met Thomas. Before I even knew he existed. How could he have been there, watching me with Daniel? I rubbed my eyes, blinked, held the photo closer. My mind screamed that I was mistaken, that it was a trick of the shadows. But the jawline, the tilt of his shoulders, even the faint scar across his cheek, it was him. Which meant one of two things: either I had been living in a lie far longer than I realized, or the photograph itself held a truth I was never meant to see. I wanted to scream. To throw the picture back in the box, slam the lid, and pretend none of it existed. But instead, I sat there, clutching the image, staring at the man who had once been my husband, and the stranger who had once been my secret love. And the questions tore at me like claws. Had Thomas always known? Had he been following me, even back then? Had our entire marriage been nothing more than his revenge for betrayal I thought I had hidden? Or worse, had Daniel never been what he seemed? I remembered something suddenly, something small, something I had ignored at the time. Daniel, slipping once, mentioning a name I didn't recognize. A man he owed. A debt unpaid. When I asked, he laughed it off. Said it was nothing. Said I was imagining things. But what if that man was Thomas? The attic seemed to darken around me. I tucked the photograph back into the box, my hands clammy, my pulse racing. I had kept this secret buried all these years to protect my children. But now, I wasn't even sure I understood it myself. And then, a sound. Not from below this time. From upstairs. Upstairs. But there was no upstairs. The attic was the top of the house. Yet there it was, the unmistakable drag of a footstep across wooden planks. Slow. Deliberate. As if someone, or something, was moving above me. I looked at the ceiling. My breath hitched in my throat. For the briefest moment, I swore I saw a shadow shift, a darker stain against the dark wood. Impossible. And yet, I knew what I heard. I grabbed the box, clutching it to my chest, and stumbled down the attic stairs. My hand shook so badly I nearly lost my footing. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that screams. In the living room, I locked the door, bolted the windows, and sat with the box in my lap. But the silence didn't last. From the walls themselves came a sound, a faint, deliberate tapping. Like fingers drumming. Not from outside. From inside. And then, carried on the air, a whisper. Soft, low, almost coaxing. You should have burned the photograph. Not all promises are meant to be kept, but breaking this one nearly cost me everything. The photograph still burned in my mind as I sat in the dark living room, the box of secrets clutched to my chest. My pulse had not slowed since the whisper, "You should have burned the photograph." But there was something even heavier gnawing at me than that voice. Something older. Because the truth was, the photograph wasn't just a memory. It was a reminder of a promise I had made. A promise I swore on my very soul that I would keep. And yet, keeping it had forced me to lie to everyone I loved. Especially my children. It was Daniel who made me swear it. I can still see him, his hand gripping mine, his eyes wild with something I had never seen before. Fear. Real, bone-deep fear. Promise me, he had said. No matter what happens, you will never tell them. Not your husband. Not your family. No one. If you do, you will put them all in danger. Danger. That was the word that had silenced me. What kind of danger could he mean? At the time, I thought he was being dramatic. Maybe it was about his debts, the men he owed. Maybe it was about something darker, something criminal. But when I pressed him, he shut down. He only repeated the same words, like a mantra, like a curse. Promise me. And I did. I promised. Now, decades later, sitting in that creaking house with the past clawing its way back, I realized just how much weight those words had carried. Because keeping that promise meant burying an entire piece of myself. It meant letting my children grow up believing they knew who their mother was, when in truth, they only knew half of her. Would they ever forgive me if they learned? Would they still love me? Or would they look at me the way Thomas had once looked at me, like I was nothing more than a liar? But here is the thing about promises, they don't stay buried. They rot. They fester. And one day, they claw their way back to the surface. And mine, it clawed its way back one stormy night, decades ago, when a knock came at my door. Before I tell you about that night, you need to understand just what was at stake. Because Daniel wasn't just a lover. He was a fugitive. I didn't know it at first, not when I met him by the river, not when he made me laugh, not when he kissed me like the world could end tomorrow. But eventually, the cracks showed. His late-night disappearances. The strange man who followed him through town. The way he always seemed to look over his shoulder, as if someone, or something, was hunting him. And one evening, after weeks of evasion, he confessed. Not everything, but enough. There had been money. A lot of it. Money that didn't belong to him. A deal gone wrong. People who wanted him silenced. And then, he said something that haunts me even now. If I disappear, they will come for you. Because you are the only thing they know I care about. That was why he made me swear. That was why I kept silent all those years, even as the weight of it crushed me. Because I believed him. I believed the danger was real. And I believed breaking that promise could cost my children their lives. But promises, like ghosts, don't stay hidden forever. It was nearly 20 years after Daniel vanished. My children were grown. My husband had grown bitter, colder with age, though he never knew why. The world had shifted. But I kept my silence, believing the past was finally dead. Until that knock. It was winter. The kind of night where the snow falls thick and heavy, swallowing the world whole. I was alone in the house, my children off with their own lives, my husband away on business. The fire had burned low when I heard it, 3 knocks, slow and deliberate. Not the hurried rap of a neighbor, not the playful tap of a child. Boom. 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 I froze. My hands gripped the arm of my chair. For the briefest moment, I thought it might be the wind, a branch, something explainable. But then came the voice. Low. Male. Rough with cold. Open the door, Margaret. I know you are in there. My blood ran cold. Because that was my name, spoken in a tone that was neither kind nor familiar. How did he know me? Who was he? I crept toward the door, every step heavy as stone. My hand shook as I reached for the latch, but something, instinct, fear, I don't know, stopped me. Instead, I pressed my ear to the wood. The man outside shifted, his boots crunching against the ice. And then he said something that nearly stopped my heart. You kept his promise, didn't you? How could he know? How could anyone know? I stumbled back from the door, my mind a storm of terror. The man outside laughed, a low, bitter laugh that made my skin crawl. Then, just as suddenly as he had come, the knock stopped. The crunch of boots faded into the snow, and silence fell. But the silence was worse, because it meant the past wasn't finished with me. It meant someone out there knew. I stood there, trembling in the glow of the dying fire, my breath fogging in the cold. Outside, the snow swallowed every trace of him. But I knew that knock wasn't just a warning. It was a promise of its own. A promise that my secret wasn't buried. And that someone, maybe more than one someone, was coming back to collect. The worst pain isn't from strangers, it's from the ones you trust most. I don't share this lightly. A wound from an enemy, you can brace for that. You expect it, fight it, maybe even forgive it. But betrayal from someone you love? That's a cut that never truly closes. A stranger may slash you once, and the scar fades. But a loved one? Their betrayal slices deeper, again and again, long after the first blow. That was the kind of pain I carried, invisible, silent, but sharp as glass. And it was the reason I hid so much from my children. Not out of cruelty. No, I stayed silent because some truths are jagged enough to split an entire family in two. You see, betrayal has a sound. It doesn't always crash in with shouting or slammed doors. Sometimes it whispers. A drawer left open. A scent that should not be there. A look that lingers too long. And for me, betrayal came wearing the smile of someone I thought I could trust with my life. Her name was Evelyn. My younger sister. My shadow, my confidant, my partner in childhood mischief. She was 5 years younger, bold where I was cautious, reckless where I was careful. She had a laugh that filled entire rooms, and eyes that caught the tiniest details, details you sometimes wished she would miss. When we were little, I used to braid her hair by candlelight. She'd whisper, "Promise you will always protect me," and I would squeeze her hand and answer, "Always." But promises don't always survive adulthood. They don't survive greed. And Evelyn's smile, once so familiar, so trusted, became the mask that hid her betrayal. It began small. Harmless, I thought. Evelyn asked questions. Why do you keep that box under your bed locked? Why don't you ever talk about that night? Who sent you those letters, Margaret? At first, I laughed them off. Sisters are nosy. That's what sisters do. But something in her voice, sharper, hungrier, began to unsettle me. Then the signs piled up. My desk drawer left slightly open. A folded letter disturbed, no longer where I had left it. The faint trace of her perfume, lavender and smoke, lingering upstairs when she swore she had not left the kitchen. And one evening, her hand hovered too long over the chain around my neck. The chain that held the key. The only key. That was when I first wondered if I had made a terrible mistake. Because Evelyn wasn't just curious. She was circling. Circling the one secret I could never allow her, or anyone, to hold. The truth came crashing through on a stormy evening. Thunder rattled the walls, rain lashed the windows. The children were asleep upstairs, the house cloaked in shadows and the hum of the storm. Evelyn sat across from me at the kitchen table, her hair damp, her smile stretched too thin. "Why do you keep it locked?" she asked suddenly, her eyes flicking toward the stairs. "What's inside, Margaret?" I forced a laugh, but my pulse spiked. She leaned closer, her voice lower now, heavier. "Don't lie to me. I know it's about him." Her tone dripped with something I hadn't expected, envy, maybe. Or greed. Or worse, knowledge. My throat tightened. She knew. At least part of it. I changed the subject, desperate to calm the waters. But Evelyn's eyes never softened. And later that night, when I went upstairs to check on the children, she was gone. And so was the box. That box wasn't just a container. It was a vault of my sins. my secrets, my survival. Inside were letters, photographs, and one very particular object, the kind of proof that could tear my life apart and drag the danger straight to my children's doorstep. When I found the empty space under my bed, I froze. My chest hollowed. My sister had stolen it. The one person I thought I could trust, the child I had once promised to protect, had stolen the very thing that kept all of us safe. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Every creak in the floor was her coming back. Every gust of wind against the glass was footsteps at the door. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was lethal. Because that box wasn't hers to touch. And if it ever reached the wrong hands, it wouldn't just ruin me. It would destroy my children too. My children never knew how much that night changed me. They thought I had simply grown stricter with age, why I jumped at doorbells, why I burned letters instead of answering them, why I refused to let them out after dark. But the truth was, their aunt's betrayal had rewired me. It had taught me that blood ties could be fragile, that love could rot into envy, that even family could be the enemy. And though they never saw the scars, I bore them. Because when I finally confronted Evelyn weeks later, it wasn't a calm conversation that followed. No, betrayal rarely ends with words. Sometimes it ends with bruises. Sometimes it ends with broken glass. And sometimes with scars you can still see if you know where to look. That night, the night of the confrontation, I made a choice. I chose silence. How could I tell my children that their aunt, the woman they loved, had put them in mortal danger? How could I stain their memories of her with the truth of what she had done? So I kept the mask on. I smiled at birthday parties. I passed the pie at Christmas. I held them tighter when Evelyn's name slipped into conversation, though eventually, it stopped being mentioned at all. But at night, when the house was quiet, I would trace the scars on my arm with my fingertips, reminding myself that silence wasn't weakness. It was protection. Or at least, that's what I told myself. Years rolled on. The betrayal faded into the background of daily life. Evelyn drifted from my world, as if time itself had exiled her. And for a while, I believed the danger was over. Until one ordinary afternoon, I was folding laundry, listening to the sound of my children's laughter spilling in from the yard. The sun was warm, golden, safe. And then I noticed it. An envelope slipped under my door. No return address. No handwriting I recognized. Inside was a single photograph. The photograph showed the stolen object, the one Evelyn had taken from my box, placed on a table like an offering. And beside it, a note. Sharp, deliberate letters. Cold as steel. It's not gone. And neither am I. My breath caught. The photograph shook in my hands. Evelyn may have been gone from my life, but this was proof that betrayal doesn't stay buried. Someone still had what she stole. And they were not finished with me. Not by a long shot. There's a night I have never spoken of, because it still burns in my memory. Flames have a way of stripping the world bare. They don't lie. They don't disguise. They consume mercilessly, hungrily, until only truth is left in the ash. That night, the night of fire, I learned how fragile my safety really was. I didn't just almost lose my home. I didn't just almost lose the photographs, the keepsakes, the fragile remnants of family life. I almost lost the secret I had been guarding for decades. And if you believe fire destroys quietly, you have never stood inside a house that's trying to kill you. It began like any other evening. The house was still. My children were grown and gone, their laughter replaced with silence, their footsteps replaced with creaks and sighs of old floorboards. I busied myself with small routines, folding linens, pouring tea, staring out the window as the sky turned deep indigo. But beneath that calm, something churned. The photograph I had received weeks earlier, proof that Evelyn's betrayal still lived, pulsed like a bruise inside my chest. Someone knew. Someone still held what had once been stolen from me. and that meant they could come at any time. The air was warm, yet I shivered. I lit a single candle in the kitchen, not for the light but for comfort. I have always trusted small flames. Flames I could control. Flames that bent to my will. But that night, the fire I lit was nothing compared to the fire that came for me. I heard it before I smelled it. A sharp crack, with splitting under a weight too heavy to bear. I padded into the hallway, slippers whispering against the floorboards. Then the scent struck me, acrid, harsh, unmistakable. Smoke. My pulse surged. I hurried forward, and when I reached the study, my worst fear flared before me. A faint orange glow licked at the cracks beneath the door. My hand trembled on the knob, but I pulled it open anyway, and staggered back. The fire was already alive. Stacks of letters curled black at the edges. Old photographs blistered in the heat. The curtains at the window had caught, flames climbing greedily toward the ceiling beams. And there, at the center of it all, lay the box. The box Evelyn had once stolen. The box that had mysteriously found its way back to me. The box I never let out of my sight. And someone who knew, had set it alight. I should have called for help. I should have dialed the fire department. But I didn't. Because I knew a truth no one else could. What was inside that box could never be found. Not even in ashes. I ripped a blanket from the hallway hook, flung it over my shoulders, and charged into the inferno. Heat slammed into me like a wall. It clawed up my arms, cinched my hair, seared my lungs. My eyes stung. My throat closed. Still, I lunged for the box. It was heavy. Far too heavy for me to carry in such a blaze. But adrenaline is a strange ally. It lends you the strength of desperation. I dragged the box across the floor, sparks falling like a deadly blizzard. Behind me, the ceiling groaned, and a beam split apart, crashing down, embers exploding across the rug. The house was no longer a home, it was a beast, alive with sound. Flames roared. Glass shattered. Wood cracked. And through the chaos, one thought pounded in my head. If anyone sees this box, if anyone sees even a glimpse of what it holds, my secret dies with me. Choking, clutching the box to my chest, I stumbled through the hallway. The front door was too far. The fire was spreading too fast. There was only one way. The cellar door. The same one I had once used to escape another night of terror. The same one tied to the promise that had cursed my life. With strength I didn't know I had, I kicked it open. The wooden door slammed against the wall, and I dragged the box down into the earth. The air below was damp, thick, cold, the opposite of the hell raging above. I slammed the door shut behind me. Down there, the silence pressed against me. The fire still roared overhead, but it was muffled now, distant. I pressed my forehead against the box, my body trembling, my lungs desperate for clean air. I had saved it. But for how long? Above me, the fire screamed, as if the house itself resented my escape. And for a moment, I was certain it would all collapse, burying me alive with the secret I had sworn to protect. You might think I should have let it burn. That fire was mercy. A clean slate. But secrets don't die with flames. They lit in the minds of those who know them. They linger in photographs that survive by chance. They live in the greedy hands of people who won't let the past stay buried. If the fire had swallowed the box whole, it wouldn't have freed me. It would have damned me. Because burned secrets invite questions. They leave holes. They tempt people to dig. And the thing inside that box, it could never be explained away. Eventually, the fire spent itself. The neighbors came running, shouting my name, pulling me up from the cellar with hands both rough and kind. The house stood, scarred, blackened, wounded, but not destroyed. The kitchen walls charred. The study gone. But the bones of the house held. They asked me what had happened. I lied. I told them it was the candle. A foolish mistake. My carelessness. and they believed me. But I didn't believe myself. Because I knew better. That fire had not been an accident. It had been a warning. Or an attempt to finish me. Someone had lit it. Someone who knew what I carried. In the days that followed, I walked through the rooms of my wounded home like a ghost. The walls smelled of smoke. The wallpaper peeled. The air was forever tainted with ash. But at night, when the house finally quieted, I opened the box. Inside, the contents were warped by smoke. Edges curled. Ink smeared. Some pages crumbled at my touch. But the object, the one object that mattered most, had survived. Even the flames had spared it. I should have felt relief. I should have thanked God. Instead, a cold dread took root in my chest. Because survival meant pursuit. If I had saved it, that meant someone else would still come for it. And they would not stop until they had it. For years, I told myself I had escaped unseen. That the night of fire had ended with my secret still intact, locked in shadows once more. But I was wrong. Because one evening, long after the house had been repaired, I caught movement at the edge of the yard. A figure. Still. Watching. I blinked, and they were gone. But the message was written across my skin in goose flesh. Someone had seen me that night. Someone had watched me drag the box into the cellar, had watched me protect it like my life depended on it. And now, they knew. I thought the fire was the end of my secret. But it wasn't. It was only the beginning. The beginning of being hunted. You may think you know your mother, but I promise, you don't. For decades, silence was my shield. People assume silence means peace, that if nothing is spoken, then nothing stirs beneath. But silence is heavy. It presses against your chest until you can barely breathe. It whispers in the dead of night, louder than any scream. I stayed silent for you, my children. For your safety. For your innocence. For the lies you built without the shadows I carried. But silence has an expiration date. And tonight, with the years behind me and only truth left ahead, I must finally tell you everything. You have wondered why I was always cautious. Why I never trusted easily. Why I locked doors twice, sometimes 3 times. It wasn't paranoia. It was survival. I made a promise once, a promise that bound me to a secret larger than myself. I thought I could bury it, that by not speaking it, I was sparing you. But secrets don't die in the dark. They grow. They rot. They seep into everything. I didn't want you to inherit my fear. I wanted you to have a childhood free of dangers I once faced. So I smiled when I had to, lied when I needed to, and tucked the truth away in boxes, letters, and hidden ledgers. But you deserve to know now. Because my silence was built on betrayal. It wasn't a stranger who betrayed me. It was someone I trusted. Someone I loved. Evelyn. You only knew her as my friend, but she was closer than that once. Too close. She knew things about me no one else did. And when I refused to give her what she wanted, when I chose loyalty to my promise over loyalty to her, she turned on me. She took something from me. Something that could have destroyed everything. That was the first time I realized the greatest danger in life doesn't always come from outside your home. Sometimes, it comes from the people sitting right at your table. You may remember the night of fire. You were young, and I told you it was an accident. A candle left burning too long. But that was a lie. The fire wasn't an accident, it was a warning. Someone wanted me silenced. Someone wanted the box gone. That box, it wasn't just scraps of paper, as I let you believe. It wasn't sentimental trinkets. It held evidence. Evidence of what I had promised to protect, and what powerful people wanted erased. I risked my life to say that because inside was the truth about a man who hurt many, and about the network that protected him. Evelyn had discovered part of it, and when she betrayed me, she set everything in motion. The fire was no random tragedy. It was the price of keeping a secret too dangerous to tell. Now you may ask, why not go to the police? Why not tell the world? Because the world doesn't believe women like me. Because the ones I would have named had wealth, influence, and reach far beyond what I could fight. And because of you. If I had spoken then, you would have grown up hunted, questioned, shamed. I couldn't risk your safety. So I chose silence. I chose to carry the burden alone. Do you understand now? Every locked door. Every time I told you to stay inside. Every sleepless night. I wasn't just being overprotective. I was shielding you from shadows that would have swallowed us whole. And yet, no matter how long I stayed silent, the past followed me. The night of fire, someone saw me. For years, I felt their eyes in the dark, watching. Waiting. At first, I thought it was paranoia. Then one evening, I found a note slipped under the door. No words. Just a photograph of me, younger, standing beside Evelyn. Proof that someone still had the pieces of the story. That was when I knew silence wasn't enough. That one day, I would have to speak. But I waited. Waited until you were grown. Until you were strong enough to hear it. Until I could be sure you were safe. And now, here it is. The truth I never told you. The man at the center of all this, the one whose crimes I promised to guard, was your grandfather. My husband. He wasn't the man you thought he was. He wore charm like a mask, respectability like armor. But behind closed doors, he was ruthless. Dangerous. He built wealth not by honor, but by exploitation, by stepping on those who couldn't fight back. Evelyn discovered his dealings, and when she tried to use them against me, she underestimated how far I'd go to keep his sins from devouring you too. I protected you from his truth. From the ruin his legacy would have brought you. But that protection came at a cost, my silence, my fear, my scars. Even now, as I speak these words, I feel the scar on my arm from the fire. It burns some nights, reminding me that truth cannot stay hidden forever. I see the doubt in your eyes when you think I am too careful. I hear your unspoken questions about my past. And now you know why. I chose silence so you could live free of his shadow. But I cannot carry it to my grave. If I do, the truth dies with me, and I cannot allow that. Why tell you now, after all these years? Because I am old, and time is short. Because the one who has been watching me, the figure in the yard, the eyes in the dark, may not wait forever. And if they come for me again, I need you to understand why. But most of all, because I love you. And love, real love, does not hide forever. It tells the truth, no matter how heavy. You may think you know your mother. You may think you know your grandmother. But the woman who tucked you in at night, who baked pies and told bedtime stories, she was also the woman who fought flames, who buried betrayal, who carried a secret so large it threatened to swallow her whole. This is my confession. My burden. My truth. And as I hand it to you now, I ask only this: do not hate me for my silence. Understand me for it. Because silence wasn't weakness. It was the fiercest act of love I had to give.